Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I appreciate you guys stopping by. So I was able to make it back. I know I'll get at least this video. I'm trying to catch me another video before I go to sleep, because it is getting close to bedtime. It is night over here. So I have the round 4 semi-final game between Wesley and Magnus Carlsen. And so, for all of my people in the Philippines, as always, mabuhay. Masaya kong makita kang muli. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood ng aking my video and aking my channel. Appreciate you guys very much. Ingat lagi to you guys. Let me see. Almasal tayo, magalunch na tayo. Whatever it is for you. Magandang umaga, magandang hapon, magandang araw, magandang gabi. Appreciate it very much, guys. Anybody who is coming from Norway, I will say God Morgan to you, or hello, and tusen tak. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got e4, c6. We see d4, d5, and we have e5. So we do have the Caro-Kann defense, and it is the advanced variation. So we have stepped completely off of our normal, you know, d4, d5 type opening. And we do have something that I've rarely shown. So we do see bishop to f5. It's always advisable to get this bishop outside the pawn chain instead of just kind of locking it in, because then you pretty much have the same problem that you have in the French, which a lot of the times, I mean, the French is so solid that even though you do kind of have a bad bishop, it doesn't end up usually being that bad. So we do see knight to f3, we see e6, we got bishop to e2, knight to e7, we see castles, we got h6, knight b to d2, we see knight to d7, knight over to b3, we see a5. You know, like I said before, anytime you have like this type of knight placement, you're usually going to see like a wing pawn, you know, one of the A or H pawns get thrown out just to try to inconvenience the knight, because it's not the most natural square for it to be on. This is very usual stuff. And then so you do see a4. You don't want to see black playing a4 because then you kind of have to try to put your knight somewhere, and you just worked really hard to get it to b3. So we do see queen over to b6. We see bishop to d2, bishop back to h7. We see rook to c1, knight comes to f5, and then we do see bishop to d3, and that is the novelty of the game. You know, I mean, this bishop is here protecting this knight, but if at some point the bishop goes away or redirects itself somewhere, you know, you would very much like to take here and kind of inconvenience black's pawn structure, you know, to make it easier for you to start to, you know, kind of penetrate with the rooks and stuff like that. But we do see bishop to b4. We see bishop takes b4, queen takes b4. We have c3. We have queen back to e7. We see queen to c2, just adding extra pressure onto this knight here. We see bishop to g6, you know, because after, you know, we castle, we're going to be really kind of hard pressed to move this knight, because this bishop is going to be only defended by the king. So that's going to create some type of check situations. So we see g3. And, you know, as you guys can see, you know, the thing about the Caro-Kann that makes it a little difficult to play, really from, you know, probably from the white side. I've never really experienced it from the black side like that. But playing it from the white side, there are so many possible move combinations. And there's so many just possible like routes that you play. If you like looked at this one, you see these wing pawns that got thrown out. You know, this bishop kind of went back and forth a little bit. You know, this knight, you know, these knights and stuff. So there's so many different, there's so much theory. There's so many different possibilities that, I mean, for me personally, I don't know about these guys, but, you know, it made it kind of tough for me to play from the white side. So it wasn't my nicest opening to play against. Everybody kind of has their openings that they don't like playing against. We see castles by black. We see rook f to e1. We see c5. Pawn takes c5. Knight takes c5. Knight takes c5. And then we do see queen taking c5. Adjust this just a touch here. Bam. And so we have queen over to e2. We see knight back to e7. Now, this is encouraging the trade of bishops. You know, as far as like white and black are concerned, you know, the bishops aren't really super great in the position because, I mean, it's pretty closed. So, I mean, it's not really that bad of a thing to get rid of them. So the bishop takes g6. We see knight takes g6, and then we see knight to d4. We see knight back to e7. We see queen to b5, encouraging a queen trade. And so we see rook f to c8, queen takes c5, rook takes c5. We see rook to c2. We got knight over to c6. And we don't really want to trade in this particular position, so knight comes to b5. We're trying to stay active. I mean, once you get down to rooks, you know, the problem with the position is there aren't a lot of open files for the rooks to really play on. So you have to work to try to create them. So we do see d4, f4 comes, just solidifying that pawn structure over there. We see pawn takes c3, and then we see rook to d1. Knight comes to b4. We do see rook taking c3. We see rook taking c3, and then we see knight taking c3. And some of you guys might wonder, like, why would you back your knight up? Just take with the pawn. It was actually legitimate to take with the pawn as well. After rook took c3, you could have definitely played pawn takes c3. And then knight would try to redirect to attack the pawn on a4. You see king to f2, knight rook to c or knight to c5, rook to d4, and it pretty much amounts to about the same thing. So you know, it's not like you have a lot of great opportunities with the knight being there. So like I said, it's pretty much the same thing. So we do see rook to c8. We see rook up to d7 because why not put the rook on the 7th? But we can't just move the pawn to b6. We see rook to d6, rook to c6, rook takes c6, knight takes c6. And then we have pretty much fixed pawn structures, and we have some kings and a pair of knights. So it might kind of look like it's pretty dry, but this is actually kind of when the game picks up some steam. Like it starts to become a roller coaster. Like, you know, both sides have like many chances. So we do see king to f2. We see king over to f8. And then we've actually reached a point in the game that if you do want to guess the best possible move in the position for white, go ahead and do so. All right, cool. So automatically you're thinking like to just try to improve your king's position, like trying to like, you know, finagle it over here. But a very, very nice idea in the position. And this is actually, we did not see this in the game, was actually to go knight to e4. And knight to e4 is very useful because trying to get, you know, this is something like the d6 square should have, like, as white, should have kind of stood out to you as like a possible place to go to because it's just such a nice outpost for the knight. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to simultaneously attack both of these pawns, like with two different scenarios. So like I said, if you do see knight to e4, king comes to e7, you have knight to d6, and now you're pretty much holding this king down to this pawn, but you're also threatening to fork here and win a pawn. So, you know, it's never something bad, you know, in a knight type of an endgame to win a pawn. It doesn't mean that you're just automatically going to win, but, you know, it usually makes things easier. So you would probably see like f6, the knight would come to c8 with check, king would go over to f7, pawn takes f6, king takes f6, knight takes b6. You guys can see that you've just won a pawn as white. So this is just one of the ways. It just pretty much is a good way to kind of tie you know, black down to their pawn structure a little bit. And that's kind of what you want to do when you get into an endgame with kings, is try the best you can to try to tie the king down to a specific point on the board while, you know, you have kind of like complete movability with your own king. So like I said, we did see king coming to e3 in this position instead of knight to e4. So we do see king to e7, we see king to d3. So pretty much what I was telling you before, like, you know, it's not like it's losing, but I mean, this is pretty much a good idea to go with your kings. The king comes to d7, we see king to c4, knight back to e7, freeing up the space for your king to come through, king to b7, king to b5, and then we see king to c7. And we have also reached a point where knight to e4 is possible here too. What we actually saw in the game was king to a6. But knight to e4 was definitely a very real possibility as well. Just, you know, getting into that square. You know, if the knight would come to c6, we see knight to d6. It's really, really hard to try to hold on to that pawn now. So the knight would probably come down and check on d4. The king would come to c4, knight to f3, attacking our own pawn on h2. So we would push that to h4. And after the king comes down to c6, now we've gotten a pawn like we did before, but just kind of in a different way. So as you guys can see, like, there was many different situations where that knight to e4 move was pretty clutch. But like I said, we did see king to a6. We see king down to c6. We see knight to b5. We see knight down to d5. We see knight to d6. We see f6 because, you know, something kind of has to give now. But black's knight and king are in like a much better position than in the other positions. So we see knight to e8 with the pawn takes e5, pawn takes e5, we see g5. So as you can see, black in these positions has the ability to kind of defend their position and not just lose a pawn. So we see knight down to g7, we see knight to b4 with check, king to a7, knight down to d3. So now we're giving like a fork on these two pawns. So we see knight takes e6, knight takes e5, and it makes way more sense to take the central pawn because it is completely passed than to take like a wing pawn. So these pawns, as you guys know, just in general, you know, these wing pawns are not going to be as important, you know, as central pawns. They're going to be the most important pawns, no matter if you're in the opening, the middle game, or the end game. And so we see king back down to a6. We have knight to f3. We see h3. We see h5. We see b3. We got h4. We got g4. So everything is pretty much just kind of getting like, you know, solidified and just kind of tied up on the board. We see king to d6. We see knight to g7. We see king to c5. We see knight to e6. We see king to c6. King to a7. King to d6. Knight to g7. King to c6. King to e6. Or knight to e6, king to d6, knight to g7, king to c6, and then knight back to e6. And it is in this position that the players agreed to a draw. Now, I will do this. I will go back to this initial position that we had after we saw h4 and then g5, locking everything up. Like I said before, there is actually a really nice move after we see, like I said, king to d6, we saw knight to g7, and there is actually a winning move for black in this position. At this point in the tournament, you know, Magnus Carlsen, all he needs is draws, you know, as black. Like, he doesn't need to win the games. So, I mean, instead of just going ahead and going for the win, he just went ahead and just accepted the draw. Wesley so knew he was losing the game. But like I said, if you want to go ahead and pause the video right now and spot the winning move for black, go ahead and do so. Okay, cool. So you guys probably noticed that there is a knight to g1 move, and it just attacks this pawn, and there's like literally nothing that white can do about it. And that's literally the position. If you were to go knight to g1, there's nothing that white can do to, you know, defend this pawn. This pawn is going to be dropping. So, I mean, even if like white, you know, did like, there's nothing like maybe just, you know, maybe something like this or whatever. Oh, that's check. Okay, cool. Let's just move up here. You know, there's nothing really else for, you know, there's nothing really else. Wait a minute. Is there something else? This is definitely winning. Yeah, and then there's that, but the king is in time to stop that. Yeah, okay, yeah, no. There was the computer gave this move, so there's winning. I mean, I didn't work out all the complications, but basically, after you are capable, get back into the square. Take here. Wait a minute, hold on. What's going on? Okay, knight, pawn takes, push here. Yes, there's a way for you to stop. Maybe. No, wait. I'm sitting there really trying to work this out. I didn't do this before I got in the video. Let me see. Knight takes, and then pawn takes. You push pawn, you're in the square. So this is pretty much the idea. You're just going to stop the pawn like this. So it's going to just keep trying to go, whatever. Okay, you're going to stop it like that. And then, you know, the white is going to try to, like, maybe kind of, you know, take the pawn. You're going to take here. This pawn is going to be queening a lot quicker than the other pawns. Maybe if you had something like this, the knight just moves away. Let's see here. You can even do something like that. Take here. Move, 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 move. Check. No. It works. I just did not take the time to sit there and look at the position and figure it all out. So you were like literally watching me trying to work through the situation. But that is a completely winning move in the position. Like I said, the computer said knight to g1 was like +3. So that's just completely winning. It's kind of something like this. Anyways, it's rare that I actually go off and just kind of wing it. But I mean, I was winging it in that one. I had it worked out differently in my mind when I was looking at the game before I got onto the video. So forgive me that I don't know 100% how it works out, but it's the computer's move. So as we all know, the computers are smarter than humans. So I concede to the genius of the computer. But anyways, that was another move that was possible to win the position. But we actually just saw the game get drawn. And that was all that Magnus Carlsen needed. And he went on to draw the next game after that, and then he won. So he'll be playing Aronian. I think they're already playing right now. I'm not sure exactly when they do that, but that is that. I've been able to actually pick, so that you guys that watch my stuff, you guys know that I've been pretty good with like 9 to like 12-minute videos, but sometimes you pick games that like you only have to pick a game that's really long. Like this one was actually 57 moves. I usually try to get like in the 20 to 30 move range, so that way the video isn't super, super long. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to say my good mornings in the other languages, and I'm going to go ahead and just cut out. But I appreciate you guys very much. Maraming salamat, aking makaibigan, and paalam, and mamaya, aking makaibigan. I'll see you guys next time.